My guest today is Brenda Soya, Public Affairs Officer at Consulate General, Mumbai. Brenda directs the public diplomacy and outreach efforts to reach 400 million people in Western India to further US policy and strengthen people-to-people relations. She leads Consulate General Mumbai's diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility organization and is committed to the aspirational goal of women's economic empowerment. Brenda's State Department career includes working in Sierra Leone, the Holy See, Vatican, Togo, and Burkina Faso. She received a master's degree in security studies at the Naval War College and has a BA summa cum laude from the University of Colorado at Boulder. And she was a President's Leadership Class and a Boettcher Scholar. Without further ado, over to our conversation with Brenda. Hi, Brenda. Welcome to Atlanta Diaries.
Thanks so much, Anman. Happy to be here with you.
Awesome. And I can't help but seeing the beautiful henna on your hands.
Oh,
I'm just wondering.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, isn't it?
It is. Tell us more.
No, it's great fun. There is a book club of a group of women here that have a book club, and we read The Henna Artist.
Yes.
And so the woman who was hosting the book club invited two henna artists to come to the house last night. And we sat, and you put your hands up on the pillow and they do the front, and then you wait half an hour and then you do the backs. So it was just it was a cultural moment, right? We read a book about it. She brought jasmine flowers for our hair. And so we could it was just an evening of getting together. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's lovely. We spoke so much about culture, and there you go. It's just testament to the amount of immersion you do, right? I love that. Yeah. To begin with, love for you to share and describe your childhood and in what way do you think it played a role in shaping the person you've become?
Oh my gosh. I think, that's a big question to think about, but a few pivotal moments or a few key things. So I have two brothers and one sister, and my parents are also Catholic. My family is Catholic. So our faith and going to church on Sunday was very much a part of my childhood. We all did different sports activities or going to the neighborhood rec center where you would do like an artist class or a cooking class. And, at the end of the week, your parents come and look at what you made. I can remember in high school, my parents would never miss a basketball game. So I had a very family-centered childhood, and that even extends into adulthood. I'm very close to all my siblings still and my parents. And I think another pivotal moment was I grew up in Denver, which is the capital of Colorado, just kind of a normal neighborhood. And when I was about, I want to say 11, maybe 10 or 11, we had to move to a town called Woodland Park, west of Colorado Springs. Woodland Park was up in the mountains, but the population at that time was probably 10 or 15,000 people. So it was really small. So I went from a pretty big school to a smaller school. I went from a private Catholic school to a public school. But also with that was a lifestyle change for the whole family. Just being in a much more diverse community and adapting to what my dad would call the mountain lifestyle, which was much more focused on activities. So in Denver, you would take off and go to the museum or go shopping, or you're driven much like Mumbai, right? You're driven by restaurants or activities or events. Whereas Woodland Park was much more about the people. So the town had a big 4th of July celebration for Independence Day. We all went. Like you'd see all your friends there, and there'd be games and the fireworks. So that move, I think, had a big impact on me to be able to realize too that you can just pick up and go somewhere, right? And make friends. And I think I learned that at quite a young age and an impressionable age. So I think there are threads like sports and family and religion that carry into adulthood.
So you mentioned last time that you didn't have clarity about your career path and later on made choices on assignments in foreign service. So Brenda, I'm just wondering, what kind of a thought process did you have when you made these choices? Was it happenstance in any way, or was it just intentional?
Yeah, I'd have to side more with its happenstance, but it's more than just a random flip your coin. It's very much being aware of the opportunities at hand and being able to think it through and talk to people and say, well, I want to follow an opportunity as opposed to just saying, well, I don't know, I'll just try something. So as I talked to people and as I took different classes, I was like, astronomy. I loved it, learned a ton, no interest in NASA or science or pursuing a life on the International Space Station, right? So you can eliminate. So I talked to more people and I started taking communication classes. One, I loved them because they were small. They were 20 or 25 people. We had discussions, we had projects, we had experiments. Also, people that advised me that I talked to about their careers said, well, communication, you could go into business, you could go into teaching, you could work in nonprofit, you could go into public service and work for government, you could do like a human resources officer. And so the advice was, well, do something that makes you happy. So you don't want to hate going to class. So go to class where your curiosity will be touched. But communication didn't lock me down into a career, which, like you said, then led to more choices. So when I finished university, I had a Boettcher scholarship. It's a Colorado specific scholarship for students who attended high school in Colorado as a part of enriching the state, keeping us committed to the state. And so with a full ride scholarship, as I'm graduating, I didn't have to think, what's my job? Because I'm going to have to pay a student loan immediately. And I had savings from that I had been saving for college that I didn't use. So it gave me the freedom to look at a volunteer opportunity, as we talked about. And then even as I moved on with Habitat for Humanity, it gave me that opportunity to say, it's a job, but it's $400 a month plus housing. And that's okay because I'm not locked in to debt. So communications led me to the NGO Habitat for Humanity. I took a very entry level, low paying, high resource job or high experience job because I could. And then I was in Ethiopia. Well, then I met more people, right? I met people who worked for the UN. I met people who worked for private companies, and I met people who worked at the U.S. Embassy. And the people who worked at the U.S. Embassy certainly encouraged me to take a foreign service test. Right? So I had never heard of the Foreign Service. I hadn't heard about embassies except in passing. It never struck me as a career. But then later, when I'm meeting people and learning what they do, I thought this is a great way to serve my country. This is a great way to also share my culture, to learn other cultures. And I think I've always surrounded myself with smart people, right? I tell a lot of the interns that we have here, I say, go and shadow someone for a day. Even if you're not sure you would do the job, go shadow someone in marketing or go shadow someone who does a sports management or coaching, like just to see what adults do. Because we have such a narrow view when we are in college, when we're in high school, and there's so many careers that we don't even know exist, right? So I think it's important to surround us with people who can tell us about what they do and lead us to other opportunities.
Brenda, what inspired the decision to take on volunteering as a next step after college?
I think what drove me there was a sense of curiosity, but also a sense of service to the world, right? Like I learned so much in university about the world. I am of the age where all the artists got together and sang songs about famine, Live Aid, the song, right, about the famine in
Yes.
Ethiopia. And that I was at an impressionable age where I thought there should not be starving people in the world. And I
Mm.
think that coupled with my faith, I needed to take that moment to volunteer, to serve others. And I think it naturally led towards serving my country too. So it gives me a chance to be a representative of America, but also have an impact in individual lives. And as I've grown in my career, it moves from kind of a grassroots relationship I had when I worked at Habitat for Humanity to something that's more policy, where we think about what do two governments say when they work together. And I also have to underscore, I'm here on my personal capacity. So while I'm very proud of my job, what I'm talking about are not official views in my job. They're my personal beliefs and my personal feelings.
Absolutely. In fact, the fact that you gravitated towards service to the country is the starting point. What you do about it is something which people can even read, where these conversations allows people a peek into, the thought process and so on. Any anecdotes or experiences in these volunteering engagements?
Well, so in my 20s, I was working with Habitat for Humanity, and I was based in Ethiopia for some time and then sometime in Senegal. And gosh, I made so many memories. And so part of my job was to help the Habitat for Humanity sites in Ethiopia to prepare to have volunteers from other countries. And they came from all over the world, not just the United States or Europe, to volunteer and build houses. I remember going to a very simple guest house and just talking about hygiene and sanitation. And I think they brought like 2 rolls of toilet paper. They're like, yes, we have toilet paper. And I was like, no, you need like 2 rolls in every bathroom because people expect to see it. And they're like, oh. And I also found the communities were so open to having these volunteers. And when we talked about bottled water and purified water for cooking, it moved to like an extreme of like washing dishes with bottles of bottled water. And I was like, no, that's okay. Just boil the water and wipe it off with a clean towel. But we don't want people to get sick. They're going to go back and they're going to say, this trip was terrible. And just the loving and caring that they offered to the foreign volunteers that came in. I mean, that really touched me. And I think that stays with me. I really do enjoy having people, but I very much want to make sure they're comfortable, they feel welcomed, they have everything they need. Whether you're on a layover because you came in the morning and your train goes out at night, or you're staying with me. And again, there's a word in Ghana or West Africa largely used, akwaba, and it means welcome. So those kinds of memories of just when people meet you, they very much treat you like you are royalty. And it's because you're a guest. And it's this recognition of you have come from afar, even if it's across town, we're going to welcome you. And I think that's kind of one of the most beautiful cultural practices. And I think it's the warmth and welcoming I felt in West Africa that I've tried to adapt. It's the communities in Ethiopia as foreigners were going to help them. They actually felt obligated to take care of the foreigners. And I think at the end of the day, the volunteer builders went home more changed than the community they went to go build for.
Brenda, as you were narrating your experiences, another thought which came to my mind was, and since I live stateside now, there's so much of difference in the ambience and, in a sense, number of people. A town of 10 to 15,000 people, and probably your building itself, you'll have 10 to 15,000 in Bombay. And of course, I can imagine Ethiopia and Senegal and all. So were those concerns for you? Now you're in foreign services, so you and your family is conditioned to travel all the time. But early on, it was a huge shift out of your comfort zone. Love to talk a bit about that because not everyone wants to do that.
So when I went from my small high school to the University of Colorado, which had my political science class and my biology class had 500 people in it, right? Bigger than my high school. I mean, that was a shock, but I think you learn resilience skills, right? Like I can walk into a room with 500 people and think, there are at least 100 people here that are going to become my friend. Or I can walk into a room of 500 people and think, okay, I want to blend into the wall. I'm going to pretend I'm not here. Maybe one person and I'll talk. So moving to Mumbai, certainly intimidating. Certainly the first morning when I opened the window and could see skyscrapers for as far as I could see, that was shocking. Getting into the taxi, kind of heading downtown, seeing people on the street everywhere. Like there is nowhere without people. Certainly shocking. But now it's fun because now you're looking for what people are wearing or you're looking for something unique. So Mumbai, people sell everything on the street. So now it's kind of a game of like, what's the funniest thing you can see people selling? Or the other day I was walking in southern Mumbai, kind of the older area, and I was fascinated because there was a man with a drum and there was a girl who had basically a tightrope that they had attached between 2 big lampposts. And when you stop and he starts drumming, she basically did this tightrope walk. And then you'd
Yes.
put money into the pot and then she would do something like a spin or something. And you just think about the creativity of what they're going to do to earn money, right? So I guess that's it, right? Your perspective and how you approach a situation. I could go to South Mumbai and be scared and think something's going to happen. Or I can go to South Mumbai thinking, what is the most interesting thing I can find to eat on the street? Or what is the most unique clothing or color that I'm going to see? And for me, I engage the creative mind. What am I going to discover? Especially if someone's thinking about moving, don't think about what you're leaving behind. Think about what is going to be the most interesting story that you can tell everyone at home about.
And clearly, that joy and curiosity was a part of you from days of Habitat for Humanity.
I think so. I think Habitat sparked that. Yeah. And I think back to my parents too and my siblings, right? They were very much joyful. They taught us gratitude. I think my siblings too, they love to laugh. And certainly when you volunteer, you certainly learn to be joyful about your experiences that surround you. And often you learn it from the people you think you're serving. They actually teach you much more.
Can't agree with you more on that. Shifting gears, Brenda. So tell us about your language learning journey. What inspired you? How did you approach new languages?
I love using them. Master is the question. I think it's important to communicate. So I worry less about grammar. So I learned French in high school, but I didn't have any experience to really use it. So French kind of check the box, pass the test, tuck it away. And then I did a study abroad my junior year of university to Hong Kong. And I dove in and learned Cantonese. And that was my purpose. Like I went to Hong Kong, I took 9 hours of language and then a 3 hour sociolinguistics class. And yeah, I think it's curiosity about culture and trying to find a way to get out of my zone and learn as much as I can. With State Department, I picked up French again and definitely improved my skills, learned to speak at a much higher level than I had obviously in high school. And so with language, you also learn culture. As you're learning verbs, you're learning about riding the bus, right? Or you're learning to count money, and then you learn the history of the lira to become the euro. So you start learning geopolitics as well.
Hmm.
You learn the history of a country as part of the language. And I think embracing the whole part of it, the food, the money, the transportation is really important. And you have to immerse yourself in it and learning the richness of the history and the culture that surround the language and the people who speak the language is absolutely vital.
So, given your profession, clearly culture is at the heart of everything, right? So, how did you navigate the different cultures over the years? Love to hear some anecdotes, Brenda, about cultural shock and adaptation.
So when I went to Hong Kong was my first time leaving the United States. So I was a junior in university and I went with a friend to her house and her parents had prepared a beautiful fish dish that looked like a fish. Right? And up to that moment, I'd always had filet or, pieces or fish curry where it's broken up. This was a platter with lettuce and a full fish with onions, and it had the eyeballs and the gills. And I just kind of smiled and thought, wow, this is a fish. And then like your head is like, I'm the ending hunger activist, and I've always been working so people have food. But I realized kind of in that moment how disconnected I was from the animal products of the world, right? Like we had a vegetable garden. I knew where tomatoes came from, but I had never really thought about kind of the pieces. So there I am with the fish. And then her grandfather offers me the head because that is the honorable piece, to which then I had to fumble with my chopsticks and try to eat the eyeball, which I ended up using a fork. I mean, I was pretty good with chopsticks, but I couldn't quite get the eyeball. And like, there's that moment. I'm in my early 20s, smiling at this great family that has gathered to greet me, the American. And I'm like, I'm going to eat an eyeball. But you have to do it. You have to do it because they have prepared this for you. This is an honor. And it didn't really taste like anything. It really was no big deal. I think, your own mind is your worst enemy. So I think when that happened kind of very early in my adult life, it kind of sets the stage for try everything. So I mean, on a very basic level, that culture has so many layers. I think that's kind of the most important thing you could ever do is break bread, share a meal with someone, because that opens up the doors to learn about their life. So in high school, someone handed me a quote, and I don't remember it exactly anymore because I've morphed it in my own brain. But it was, before you enter a room, take off your shoes and recognize that God has walked in before you. And essentially what it meant was people have been where you are, right? So whatever country you go to, I'm not the first American to be in that country. I'm not the first American to walk into that restaurant. So to recognize someone has built that place, a history has taken place there that might have war and peace and royalty and leadership and upheaval and martyrs and, right? Like just really recognizing that there's been a long history before you ever entered that country or walked in, and you need to be aware of that. And also just at a very simple level, back to the volunteering, it's very easy to think, I'm a volunteer, I have something to give, I have something to offer. And that phrase really reminds you to take off your shoes and ask the people that you are serving about their lives. They have rich histories too. They don't need to be saved. They might be in a difficult situation that needs assistance, but they don't actually need us. We are there helping or serving in a specific aspect. And so I think that quote just emphasizes to pause that minute and be grateful for what has happened before you got there, because that also helps you to be curious and ask questions too and realize you are not the center of what is happening.
Any cultural faux pas or any cultural aspects over the years which you found challenging?
That's a great question. There's lots of little pieces like there's an
Hmm.
American phrase like, I'm going to kick you out of the room. Or like, I'd say like our interview's over. I'm going to kick you off my screen. And it's all in joking. And someone said to me, they said, that word kicking is really bad, right? Like,
Hmm.
because we literally see it as you're angry, or like you kick a soccer ball with your foot. And in this culture, you don't do things with your feet like that.
Right.
So I was like, oh. So then I stopped. You just automatically are like, I am no longer going to say, I'll kick you off or I'll kick you out, or like you just stop using the verb kick unless you're actually playing football.
Shifting gears, Brenda, given again, I'm imagining hectic professional life and even probably navigating time zones, in a sense, America is also part of your role. So how do you strike that balance between your personal and your professional life?
That's a great question. I always talk about work-life integration, and I don't deny that I'm a mother and a wife and I have a family and they're in America. And I don't deny that I'm also ambitious in my job and I want to do my best professionally. So I think it's important to be clear with people about what your life is and also kind of the way the integration worked. Like today, for example, I just made sure that I took some time in the afternoon, checked in with the children, made sure they were doing fine, had what they needed, make sure dinner is ordered or they knew, well, we had leftovers, so they just have to know what they have to put in the microwave. Teaching them at a young age how to put food in the microwave so that they are very self-sufficient. So I very much integrate my work life and my personal life. So what that could look like is maybe I get up at 5 a.m. and I work on email for especially crossing time zones. So 5 a.m. I can still hit people in the States at night. I can also talk to my brother who's in the West Coast. And then at 7 a.m., it's all about getting with my children, making sure they're ready for school. When they were younger, they needed a lot more help. We have breakfast together. It's important to me to see them off for the day, to have that moment to say, good morning, I love you, is very important for my husband and I. And then I'm heading off to work. And then, I'm working during the day, but then maybe I take a break for 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon to manage personal things. Or sometimes I do a late night call at 9 o'clock at night because I want to make sure I have that 5 to 8:30 with my family to have dinner, to look at homework, to talk about our days. So that might mean then getting on late at night. For me, that integration works. I know I have colleagues who then their day is very long. They get home at 7:30 or 8, but then they're done. The rest of the night is for the kids, the family. So I think it's important to have that integration, to be clear with our bosses, to be clear with our subordinates, to be clear with our colleagues. No, I can't help you. Right now is family time. I'll be happy to help you in an hour or half an hour, that sort of thing. I think I totally respect, especially, well, back to the Mumbai thing. Traffic is terrible. So I have colleagues who are at 4:15, they are done. And maybe they can stay till 4:20 or 4:25, but they are like, I'm sorry, I have to leave. My ride is leaving. Why don't you call me in an hour because I'll be home, or text me. I'll text you back when I'm on the train. And I really respect people that can offer those boundaries and define them. And then certainly we all have rules about response time. If for whatever reason I'm working on a Saturday or a Sunday because I need to catch up or I traveled or whatever, I am very clear with my subordinates that I'm catching up, but I have no expectation to be online. So I think the integration, right? Clear communication, both up, to the side and down, and not being afraid or ashamed to say, I have a personal life and I'm back to my work life at this other time. I think that's important.
Absolutely. Brenda, what does success mean to you? What drives you?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think at the end of my life, I want to say I made a difference. So I guess success on a daily level is feeling I made a difference. And that could mean a different thing on every day, right? I made a difference because I was able to volunteer on a Saturday with an organization. Or maybe today I made a difference because I sent someone home at noon because something was going on with her family. And I said, leave. But I'm also very proud. We had a lot of paper, some background documents that are due for the ambassador who will be traveling soon. Success is the papers are done. They're well written. Everybody is in agreement on them. Like, I'm very proud of what I turn in. I think if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it fully. So success at the end of the life is that my life made a difference. Did what I do matter?
Did you ever experience imposter syndrome? And then if yes, how did you navigate it?
Yeah. And I don't know that I have because of my positive outlook and I'm going to take on this challenge, right? So I certainly have gotten myself into a situation so I arrive in Mumbai and I have the largest staff here at the consulate than I've had in my professional career. And
Yeah.
I think the second day I was like, what have I done? Can I manage this job? Okay, so call that imposter syndrome, but that lasted like 5 minutes. Then it's like, I'm here. I belong here. I was chosen to be here. The State Department assigned me here. Therefore, I know I'm capable. And then I just take bite-sized pieces, right? Okay, I have a large staff whose first names I'm not going to remember. So let me remember 2 people today and 2 people tomorrow. And it might take me 2 weeks, but I'll be very clear with everyone that it'll take me 2 weeks to learn your names. And my gosh, by the end of those 2 weeks, I did have everyone's names, but it took me 2 weeks. Know that you're there because people wanted you there. Right? And that you have the skills. So you have to remind yourself that. And the second piece is whatever you're most worried about, break it into little bits and identify a bit and tackle that bit. And identify the next bit and tackle that bit. You don't have to do all of it at once, obviously.
I know. And it's quite funny, Brenda, when you were narrating your story or this experience of having a lot of people in your team, the flip is when we moved to the US, and my husband who heads an Indian company in the US suddenly asked his assistant, where can I get coffee? And she gave him a glass and she said, go fend for yourself. And he was like, Really, like after coming from a place where I had people dying to give me a cup of coffee, here I'm told, go take this glass and go get your cup of coffee. So we always laugh about this incident, and
Yeah. Right. But on the flip side, like you're in Italy and you make your instant coffee and your Italian colleagues just look at you like you have violated something because of course, go in the kitchen and there's the grinder for the beans and the espresso maker. And like I had to learn how to like put the espresso in and pound it down and turn the handle. Like, oh no, there's no packet, right?
right.
That's a great story though. She handed him his cup and said, go fend for yourself. I love that.
And I think it was to do with the number of people, one man army versus having an army of people for yourself. I think that was the biggest thing I navigated. Brenda, talk to me about your mentorship journey. Like you talked about, speaking to interns and giving talks, but what about you as a mentee? Was there a structured mentorship journey, or did you just go and speak to anybody and take suggestions and advice?
I happily take suggestions and advice from anybody and everybody. But again, caveat, like when I seek out advice, then I know I'm ready to listen. I could tell you if you just started telling me about my jacket or something, I may or may not be open to your advice in this moment. So recognizing as a person who gives feedback, the person needs to be ready for feedback. And when I go for feedback, I need to be ready for feedback either way. So in my own journey, let's see, I think, in high school, I had two people that just kept coming to me and asking me what I needed and how they could help and offering unsolicited advice and stories and unsolicited encouragement. So one was a teacher. She got me to a program where it was a competition for two people from every state to go to Washington, D.C. Sure. Why not apply, right? The flexible me. Why not? I have a chance, right? So I applied and she helped me check my grammar and, helped me work my essay and I got selected. And then when I came back from that program, she made sure I spoke to classes, went to the elementary school, talked about this so that even at high school, she set me up to realize like it was my obligation to go talk to the elementary school about being one of two people from Colorado to go to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, to see what the capital looked like, to meet our senator, to understand citizenship. And in doing that, it got me excited about citizenship. But I also realize now she set me up to be a role model for these elementary school students. She's always been a huge go, Brenda, kind of that big cheerleader and, support in whatever way she can. And then in my foreign service career, I've had two people that I consistently go to about, it's called bid season when you're looking for your next, after you have to move again. We move every 2 or 3 years in the foreign service. So I have two people that I continuously say, I'm thinking about these 3 jobs. I'm thinking about these 3 countries. What's your advice? And they're very good about not giving advice, but giving me questions to help me think. So what will your husband do? Is this a place your husband will be happy? How are the schools? That's always a question. But then they also ask me, what is it in the job that you want to develop professionally? What is it in the job that gets you most excited? It's easy to pick a place because it sounds exotic, but you also want to ask yourself, what is it about that place that gets me excited to work? Because, we spend a lot of time in the office.
Of course.
So those two people, very, I would say very dynamic. One, we met at a conference and hit it off, and she was in our system. She was several grades ahead of me. And so the mentor-mentee role just kind of fit because of where we were professionally. She was in our system, she was a higher grade or my superior, even though she was never my superior as a boss. The other one was actually my boss and very distinctly said, I think you have a lot of potential. I want to stick with you. Let's keep talking. And I appreciate that. And I make it a point to check in with him frequently. As a mentor, I have a couple mentees that were assigned to me through professional mentoring programs. We've chosen to continue. The official program ended and we continue. The key was every month. Every month we get it on the calendar that we're going to check in, and having that time deadline is really important. So my mentee at the moment is about to transfer from one post to another. So we set up a couple of conversations about, okay, we're going to talk, and the goal of that meeting is going to be, how are you transferring your knowledge to your successor? And so in that sense, it's bends into the coaching. Like, here are the three things I'm going to hold you accountable for to help you also in your transition. And locally, there's quite a few kind of short-term mentoring programs where you go for a day and you're paired with someone. And then I see it as my responsibility, any intern we have in the office, it's my personal responsibility to make sure that I spend time with them talking about their career, their interests, writing a letter of recommendation. They're in the beginning of their career. People help me. I'm a director of an office, right? It's my responsibility to make sure that they are starting their careers correctly.
I love that. Yeah. Before we end the conversation, talk to me about your leadership journey and Brenda as a leader.
Yeah, I think leadership is learned. And I'll say I began my journey or learning leadership with this teacher in high school. I was also part of a youth organization where I was elected as a president of a club. And the adults in that world made sure that the elected officers knew our role. We knew what a president, a vice president, secretary, a treasurer, and voting members meant. They held us accountable. Even as high school students, we had to meet, we had to write our agenda. And that's leadership of an organization, right? The structural leadership. And that has to be learned. I guess as an individual, then in university, as you mentioned in my biography, I was in the president's leadership class, which was a class on leadership. And we did readings. Like, we read Machiavelli, we read Nelson Mandela's biography, we watched movies, and we literally studied leadership. Who are these people? What were their influences? How did they lead? And in that process, then you realize, oh, I'm like this person. I like how she did that. I like how he did that. I started to absorb. I absorbed what I liked that leaders did. As my career has developed, I continue to listen to leadership podcasts. As the U.S. Consulate Public Affairs Office, we have different talks from different leaders in the business community. And I'm still taking notes of like, oh, good idea. Sidebar, try this next time. And it could be a structural leadership like, wow, what a great idea on building teamwork. I'm going to try that. But it could also be an emotional side where someone's talking about feedback or some part of their life. And I think, wow, I really like that aspect. But I think if you asked me to tie what is my leadership style in a bow, I would say I'm a servant leader. I see myself helping others to be better or helping people to do something that they want to achieve. And I think there's aspects of that come with having a very strong vision and encouraging people to join that vision, but helping them also recognize what their role is in that vision so that we all kind of move together, row the boat together, whatever analogy you want to use. But very much learned. I read leadership books. I listen to podcasts, constantly kind of reevaluating where I am and how I can improve.
And on that note, since Atlanta Diaries is a place where aspiring women leaders learn and sometimes unlearn their definition of success, what are your parting thoughts for these leaders as they transition?
Great. I love that. I love that. Try everything, period. Right? Like, you cannot know that you don't like something until you've tried it. Like the story of the fish eyeball, right? Like, I didn't know what they tasted like. You have to apply for that job or try to get the job. You will learn something in the interview if you don't get that job, right? So try everything. I love Zootopia. They have that song. She takes off to the city. So I think that's kind of my parting words is try everything. But I also really, really want to emphasize care for your team. Once you're in that leadership role, it is your responsibility to take care of the mental and physical health of your team and helping them find that balance with work or whatever it is. They need a full hour to go to the gym at lunchtime. because they can't do it before or after work, then you make that helpful. So I think care for your team and try everything. Those would be my 2 pieces of advice.
Thank you, Brenda. This was amazing.
Thank you, Anma. What a great opportunity. And I love what you do with your podcast. And it's got great snippets that anyone can learn from. Even if they only listen to a 5-minute piece, there's always something interesting from what a variety of guests you have.
Thank you for being a part of this incredible journey with Atlanta Diaries. I have had the privilege of hosting guests who courageously shared their most vulnerable selves with me. And even if only a small segment of these conversations can champion the journey of one person, it will be worth each and every moment. And together, we know we can create an even greater impact. So I do have a humble request for you. If you found value in these episodes, please consider sharing the podcast with your friends, family, and on your social media. I would also love to hear your thoughts and will really appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review or rating. See you next week for another inspiring journey on Atlanta Diaries.